Guys, I'll go ahead and kick us off. It's 6:47. It's a little bit of a homecoming for us, welcoming all the students back. This semester is all about apologetics kind of fundamentals. And we start off with why apologetics, right? Because we have challenges, we have questions, and we have doubts. So let me just wrap a bow around it before I get on to the main topic tonight, okay? If I gave you this book, Annie, if I gave you this book, and I said, here's the thing, you got to start at page 99 of this 200-page book. After about 10 pages, how would you feel? You would be confused, you might be frustrated, you might have some questions. Well, when you think about God's grand narrative, we have all come in the middle of the scene. And so it's good and it's okay and it makes sense to have questions or even doubts. Doubts are just questions, right? They're the same coin, two different sides. So we shouldn't feel bad about that, and God knows that He can handle all of our questions, okay? So let me just put a bow around that and say, we're looking for questions here at Ratio Christi. And if you have friends or family members, other students that have questions that are tough, bring them on in. That's what we do, because God gives us minds in order to love Him and serve Him. Jesus told us that, right? Love the Lord your God with your heart, mind, and soul. So doubts are just questions, and we can manage that. So let me transition to tonight's topic. This came from last year prior to this session, so it was a year old. And if you look at, I did a little bit of math on this. There were 43 yeses. These are students, by the way, in the hallway of the University Union. Okay, 43 yeses, 4 no's, and 12 maybes. I know it's not a scientific survey, but 73% of the students walking down that hallway said yes, and 7% said no, 20% said maybe. So put the no's and the maybes together, that's 27%. So probably most of you in this audience are on the yes side, but maybe some of you are in the maybe or the I don't know side in terms of was the universe caused. We know for a fact that a lot of students, you take 27% of UNT. What do we have? 45,000 students here? That's almost 10,000 students, right? If you just extrapolate it out. Furthermore, I'm going to talk about professors in a minute answering this question, right? So we know that there's doubters and folks that have questions. That's my main point, okay? And we can tackle that here at Ratio Christi. Now, tonight is the first of 3 sessions about the arguments, the classical arguments for God's existence, from cosmology, from teleology, and from morality. Teleology means how things work and the purpose of things, okay? So tonight we're just going to do cosmology. And in the approach for this, audience, all of us, me included, we need to keep in mind that there's a very dangerous presupposition that's in play in our world and really quite a bit in academia. And I want to talk about that presupposition up front and kind of get it off the table and make sure that we guard ourselves from it and watch out for it a little bit. Josh was just telling me he's in a biology class. I bet you his professor has this presupposition, okay? So his professor will be leaking it to him or fire hosing it to him along the way, but I'll talk more about that in a minute. There was a survey done by Neil Gross and Solon Simmons, Harvard and George Mason University, and they surveyed 1,500 professors across the U.S., university, college professors. Overall, the 1,500 random sample, 23.4% of the professors identify as atheist or agnostic. So that would be atheist, agnostic, all right? Pretty good proxies. 23.4, kind of close to the 27%, interestingly. But guess what? At elite universities, the Harvards and the Stanfords and the Yales, right? It goes up to 36%. Goes up to 36%. And in biology and psychology, if you just take those disciplines, it's 61%. So these are the professors teaching students, and for some of us teaching our children or grandchildren someday. So this presupposition that I'm going to talk about in a minute is called materialism or naturalism, kind of synonyms. And those 61% of biology and psychology professors, and I would argue other hard and soft sciences, they're in this materialistic framework. They have that presupposition. Let me talk about it a little bit more. So The Origin of Species was published in 1859 by Charles Darwin. We've all heard the name Darwin. His theory, what's unique about it, is it provided an imaginary mechanism for materialism. What is materialism? It's the idea that everything around us, everything in the universe, everything that we know about, that we can see, is material only. It's not non-material. It's not non-physical, okay? And that's what materialism is. Here's what's required to be an intellectually honest materialist, okay? Let me give you a list of about 8 things. First, you have to believe the universe created itself. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight, okay? Second, you have to believe that non-life created life, okay? Third, you need to believe that the life that was created by non-life inside the universe that created itself, that life is capable of mutating into you and me because we've got billions and hundreds of millions of years. Okay, that's what a materialist would also believe if they're intellectually honest. You have to believe that you do not have free will. Okay? You are just a product of biology and chemistry. Your chemistry dictates what you think and decisions that you make. You don't have free will. It's called determinism. Okay? A materialist would also believe that there's no objective beauty. So mountaintops, sunsets, sunrises, there's no inherent beauty in that at all. We're going to hear more from Naphtali next semester about that. You have to believe that your consciousness, right, your awareness of who you are, that's an illusion. That's something that just happened during the evolutionary process. You have to believe, finally, that your brain, which was developed by a non-directed, random, non-controlled process, is reliable for thinking and reasoning. But intellectually honest materialists would admit that it's not, right? Yeah. Also, notice the subtitle in Darwin's book, The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Now, as a materialist, you would be intellectually honest if you believe some ethnicities or races were less valuable humans. This is where this presupposition leads if you take it there. Now, a lot of materialists are not intellectually honest. They'll claim materialism and naturalism, but all the list of things I just gave you, they would be repelled by some of those. but they're trying to claim one thing and live in God's reality all at the same time. And we need to be sensitive to that. And as apologists, we can ask them interesting questions to get them to think their own thoughts, to see the contradiction. Okay? So materialism is the presupposition I would ask you or anyone else that's going to join us to leave behind as we think about some of the arguments for God's existence. Here's an example of materialism. Richard Lewontin, he's a Harvard geneticist, famous. And let me read the quote. You can probably read it as well, but it's so good to show this lunacy that I want to read it all to you. Number one, our willingness to accept scientific claims. Now, he's talking about our being the scientific community, scientists, okay? Our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. Remember, if you're a materialist, you don't believe in the supernatural, okay? We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories. Just so stories are like when you say, well, that's just how it is. We all know that, okay? You wave your hand over it. Because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It's not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produces material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute because we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. Okay? Now, there's lots of eminent scientists who say this, and I respect him for being intellectually honest in kind of saying what it is and what they believe. I don't know how he manages this in his brain, right, to say this, but then to actually do it on a day-to-day basis, to pretend these things and to teach students, but he does. I'll just, again, emphasize, accept scientific claims that are against common sense, patent absurdity, a commitment to materialism forced by a priori adherence, cannot allow a divine foot in the door. And then this last quote, to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive. So this apparatus and investigation and set of concepts, this is science. This is all the, our government spends hundreds of billions of dollars a year on studies that are in this space. And it's unfortunate, where some of our intelligent design scientists, they have to scratch and beg for money from private sources. So maybe someday we can get that corrected. But this is the presupposition that I'm talking about that exists. And if your friends and family have been infected with this mind virus, they're not going to think that God really does exist. They're not going to think that there's an uncaused cause. We'll talk about that tonight. I do have a metaphor for this. Has anyone painted before? Yeah. I like painting. It's one of those things that you really can tell when you're done. And it looks great, and you can see where you've missed and all of that. It's very secure in that way. How many have painted a closet before? That's more difficult, right? It's awkward, it's confined. This guy's doing okay on that part of the closet, but once he gets on the inside, his pole's gonna hit, his elbows are gonna hit, right? This lady here is using a little bit itsy bitty roller to do the closet because that's all she can kind of manage. This person here, she can't even lock her ladder in place, you know. So that's what this materialistic presupposition does to good scientists. It puts them in a box because now they can't see reality for what it really is, and it's unfortunate. I think it's a good metaphor. Now, before I move on to our main topic tonight, the existence of God from the cosmos, any questions about this presupposition, materialism, also called naturalism? I'd love to address it, or if anyone has any direct experience with it. Josh, have you seen that yet from your biology professor?
Not really.
Okay. All right. Keep your eyes up for it. Yeah. Yeah, Annie. Yeah.
Could you expand more on you were talking about intellectually honest materialism?
Yeah.
Like how you can't understand something to be beautiful?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I was just trying to understand.
Inherently beautiful.
Is that because it has no material utilitarian good? Doesn't have value beyond that?
It's because there was never there was no purpose-driven process to create it. In other words, you and I look at a sunset, and we're humans, and we go, oh, that's beautiful, and a sunrise. But a materialist, if they're being intellectually honest, that's all just an accident. It's a freak of nature. So you could say it's beautiful, but that's subjective to you. You couldn't say it's inherently beautiful. Does that make sense? Jacob.
I could add to that because,
Yeah.
you could also make the argument that, mountains or Jackson Pollock paintings,
Yeah.
can also be accidental, but also, objectively beautiful. If it's abstract art or something that's not exactly intentional.
Yeah.
But I think that the key is that a materialist has to deny that we have a mind and a soul that actually can truly appreciate the inherent beauty, the beauty of the universe and the beauty of our experience. Without just acknowledging that, it's just kind of an illusion of beauty created by your need to get your genes into the next generation over millions of years, and that it's all just kind of fake. And it's the same thing with what you mentioned about reason. It's why should we trust our brains whenever it's just the product of our minds? If it's really just a function of the brain that's a product of random chance and survival.
Yeah. Thanks, Jacob. You're really onto something there, and I want to add to that as well. Yeah. So, Annie, great question, and think of it this way: that I talked about the contradiction that a materialist would live with. And this is one they would live with. They'd go out, they'd hike, they'd think the stars are beautiful, but if they take their idea all the way to the end, Greg Kokel would say, taking the roof off, they know that it's really just an accident, and maybe they appreciate it, but somebody else doesn't. There's no objectivity to that. It's not beautiful outside of them. It's just happens to be beautiful, to them at that moment. Now, they also know it's beautiful to you and to me and to everyone else. But they're not putting two and two together in that regard. They're not being honest in that way. That make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, Masoma.
Are they saying because it was not intentional and it's not beautiful? Is that the argument?
Yeah, well, they know, their worldview knows that was all random, uncontrolled. And so you could hate sunsets and they would have to agree that it's ugly. You hate sunsets because they're ugly. Now, they wouldn't be able to kind of figure that out, but that's what they'd have to live with, right? But instead, they see everyone loving sunsets, and they just live in that. But it's not intellectually honest to say that we should all love sunsets or love the look of babies, right? everything is we're all just electrochemical machines, and the universe is just all one big accident. Does that make sense? Yeah, they would say it's part of the evolutionary cycle, and that with love, you have a better chance of surviving. And so your ancestors, all of our ancestors would be animals and fish and so on, and that they learned some sort of love habit or instinct that gave them the ability to maybe be cared for so they could survive a tough situation.
So then they would have to believe that fake love that looked better would be actually better,
More desirable.
Yeah, more valuable than real love.
Explain that more.
Well, because of the functionality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and ultimately your entire conscious experience is just an illusion. That's just produced by the unintended complexity of your neurons firing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets back to this free will as well. That, and we've had students here at UNT who've said, "I believe in determinism," and we don't try to embarrass anybody. But the next question would be, are you sure about that? Are you convinced that is what you believe in?
When you decide.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's taking the roof off. Ad absurdum is the Latin for taking someone's worldview all the way to the end. And whether it's beauty, consciousness, the intelligibility of the mind, et cetera, all of these things, if you take the roof off, that's where materialism leads. And ultimately it leads to nihilism, all right? Because there's no truth, there's no morality, there's no love, right? And some of the most infamous serial killers have had this worldview. Not Manson, who am I thinking of? He wasn't a serial killer. Bundy.
How about the latest school shootings?
Yeah,
Their writings reveal that kind of
Right.
hopelessness
And Dylan, what's his name, at the Colorado, and yeah, you read their writings, it has all of this sort of stuff in it. Like, it really doesn't matter, because the world is just accidental, it's uncontrolled, there is no moral. And Ted Bundy was really clear about that. And there's an interview, it's tragic. He killed young ladies. I don't know, you younger people don't know much about Ted Bundy. He was in the 80s, I think. And he had a young lady in his back seat, and she was tied up, and he was ready to rape her and then murder her. And she had the ability to talk to him and question him about these kind of things. And he recorded it, because he recorded these conversations he had before he did his dastardly deeds. And those recordings, you can read them. And this topic came up, and she said, "Why do you think you can do this to me?" And he said, it's because of, he didn't say materialism, but it's because of these facts that there is no morality, there is no right or wrong. I can do anything that pleases me, and you don't have a say about it, right? So that's where it leads, ultimately. Ramey.
That's just so crazy to me that when you look at who the moral champion and moral hero of this type of worldview is, it's someone like that.
It is.
The most intellectual,
It's a psychopath.
version of this worldview is a sociopath.
Yeah.
And it's crazy as well, because I'll hear this argument reversed onto Christians a lot of the time too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've heard atheists over the years say that Christians are working from a conclusion, like starting with a conclusion and
Yes.
working backwards, whereas atheists are
Yeah.
doing it the right way.
Yeah.
It's clearly the other way around, because they're the ones that are limited to this materialistic worldview.
I know.
We're the ones that are not limited by that.
Okay, so I'm going to teach you some easy, quick ways. And obviously we're in good company in terms of understanding God's existence. This goes back 4, 5, 6,000 years. The Greeks were asking the same question. Why is there something rather than nothing? So who's heard about the arguments for God's existence from the cosmos, or the cosmological argument? Yeah, a few of you have. So is there anything that off the top of your mind, those of you that raised your hands, that confuses you about it, or are you pretty locked in on it? Is there anything you want to bring up right now that I make sure that I address? Well, if it comes up along the way, don't hesitate. Anybody don't hesitate to raise your hand or ask a question or comment, okay? So here's our agenda: cosmological argument. We'll do some Q&A, and this is a quick presentation. We're going to get right into Q&A, and I have some specific challenges that I want you to address, okay? And then I'll show you some resources, books, etc., at the end, okay? So let me open with prayer, though, all right? A long opening, I know. Father in heaven, give us your goodwill and blessing this evening, that we may come to better understand you and learn how to make you better understood within our family and friend group. In the name of Jesus, amen. Okay, who's heard the term syllogism? Syllogism, a few of you have, yeah, okay, anyone that's taken logic. A syllogism is a deductive inference consisting of two or more premises followed by a conclusion, right? For example, all birds lay eggs. A swan is a bird. Therefore, a swan lays eggs. Okay? Two premises and a conclusion. Now, it could be 3 or 4 premises. A lot of times we try to keep it to 2 to make it simple. Here's a much more valuable syllogism. And Masoma, will you read this for us?
Okay. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause.
All right, excellent. So let's take the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Think about that. Think about that for a minute. I say it's self-evident that everything that begins to exist has a cause. I'd say it's axiomatic, meaning everybody agrees, even if you haven't thought about it before. I'd say this is just the law of causality, right? I'd also say that any scientist relies on premise 1 to be true, otherwise they can't be a scientist, right? If there aren't causes that are consistent to things that they're studying. Any thoughts or questions, comments about premise 1?
Does it apply to like the immaterial?
The immaterial? I think it would. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking like, an idea begins to exist and it has a cause, which is generally intelligent.
The mind.
Person.
Mm-hmm. Then we have the mind and the brain, and we can talk about that as well. Cool. Materialist wouldn't see the mind as separate from the brain, but we would with a biblical worldview. So everything that begins to exist has a cause. We okay so far? I'll come back to it. Second premise then, the universe began to exist. 100 years ago, we would have all said, nah, if you're a Christian with a biblical worldview, we would have said, yes, Genesis 1. But people that are in academia and the culture and media, they would have all said, nah, we don't think so. We think it's eternal. It's always been existing. 100 years ago. Lots happened in 100 years. But does anyone hear today that the universe did not have a beginning? Has anyone heard that lately? Yeah, you'll still hear that from famous, trying to think of the guy at Arizona. Can't think of his name right now, but he's the one who argues for black holes all the time. And of course, our famous friend who passed away a couple years ago, Stephen Hawking, right? The universe created itself because the law of gravity exists. Of course. So the law of gravity is one of those immaterial things, that had to have a cause. It wasn't around forever. But the general consensus, you go to any museum that's a science museum, a secular science museum, and they're going to have a picture or a diagram of what? What's it called? The Big Bang. Yeah. Now, as a Christian, we wouldn't necessarily say, we wouldn't sign up for the Big Bang terminology because it's got a lot of baggage with it. But I'm going to show you in a minute how we can defend premise 2. Okay? I'm going to give you an acrostic, and there's some good evidence that we can defend number 2. And number 2 is what we believe anyway. It's what God told us in His Holy Scripture and His Word to us. Okay? So 100 years ago, us apologists, we had a tough time with the second premise because we were mostly relying on God's Word and our own intuition. We didn't have science on our side. Today we have science on our side. Love it. Okay? Therefore, the universe has a cause. Right? Okay. Let's talk about premise 2. So, you know what an acrostic is? It's where it's kind of like an acronym, but NASA's an acronym where it actually stands for something. And an acrostic is where you have a word where each letter of the word helps remind you of another word, okay? I want to teach you an acrostic called SURGE, the word surge, S-U-R-G-E, okay? And surge is how you're going to remember the second premise is true, okay? That the universe began to exist, okay? Let's start. The S is the second law of thermodynamics.
That would be essentially entropy always increases.
Yeah, entropy increases. And as it relates, you knew that, as it relates to the universe, what's the second law of thermodynamics doing to the universe right now? Where's the usable energy going? It's going down, and at some point, this universe will have a heat death because the usable energy is going bye-bye. Now, that's a long time in the future based on calculations, but still, if this universe were eternal, how could, it would have happened a long time ago, okay? So the second law of thermodynamics is on our side. That's the S. Everyone got that one? Okay? If the universe is slowly, or quickly, I guess slowly, because it's 10 to the 26 years from now is when the heat death will actually happen, is what we're told. That's a long time. That's a 10 with 26 zeros behind it. It's a lot of years. But if the universe is slowly losing usable energy, then it's not possible that it's been around forever. Make sense? All right. U is, we know the universe is expanding. Cosmology has shown us that it is expanding. We can measure the edges, and it's going this way in like 360 degrees, three-dimensional. Okay? Well, if it's expanding, then if you reverse that, it's coming back, and that point, cosmologists will call that a singularity, and so it had a point where it began. If it's expanding, okay, then it had a point where it began. So the universe is expanding, helps us. That's the U in surge. Okay? Then you've got R. Now, R stands for the radiation from the beginning state. And by the way, you could tell the universe is expanding with the Hubble telescope, let alone the James Webb, the new James Webb. So this goes back to 1919, so a little over 100 years ago. The radiation, this kind of shows the picture of radiation exuding from the Earth out. The cosmic background radiation is what it's called. It was discovered in 1965. I was 2. Penzias and Wilson won a Nobel Prize for that. So this radiation, no one knows why it's there, but they know that it's the remnants of the beginning event. Okay, that's the assumption right now. That's the only reason you'd have this radiation in this orderly way. Okay? I'll call it the beginning event. They would call it the Big Bang. Okay? So the radiation, 1965. So this is all accepted. Okay, I'm not doing any crazy sort of Christian-only stuff, right? This is accepted at UNT. G, galaxy seeds. Now, these were discovered in 1992. They're very precise temperature ripples that show the after effects of the beginning event. Stephen Hawking, when this was discovered in 1992, not too much older than the age of when y'all were born, Hawking said this is the most important discovery of the century, if not of all time. The fellow that discovered this, his name's Smoot, and he said, if you're religious, it's like looking at God. Pretty cool. So these temperature ripples that go all the way out from this beginning event. Again, that's all accepted today. And finally, E, our friend Einstein. So Einstein in 1916, he put forth the general relativity theory. And even today, as scientists continue to double check his theory, it's been proven to 5 decimal places, all right? And his theory says that time, space, and matter had a beginning. So general relativity, which is the going theory for how gravity, works and how the universe began, tells us that time, space, and matter had a beginning. Someday, somebody may overcome Einstein's theory, but for now, it's in a good place, to 5 decimal points. So surge. Now, that doesn't take a whole lot to memorize that, because you might want to discuss this with somebody sometime. And even if you just can remember 2 of them, like the radiation, right? Everyone knows about that. You're not going to have too many people that are in academia, students, who don't already agree with premise 2. But you might have an uncle, that decided a long time ago, before maybe some of this stuff came into being in 1992 or even 1965, or doesn't even think about these things, right? Just assumes the universe is eternal, because that's how it was 100 years ago. And you could throw some of these ideas out and get them moving in the right direction, okay? So back to the syllogism then. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. When we look at it, it's a little bit stilted. You can say it that way, but I find myself, when I say it that way to people, I sound like a robot. So I would advise you to find your own way, and when you're talking with somebody, you can kind of go, well, let me just think. Everything that begins to exist has a cause, and I think we'd agree the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause, right? And that's the great uncaused cause, if you read Greek philosophy. Everything that they would say against this would be kind of imagination. It would be sort of Marvel imagination stuff. For example, in number 1, they could say, in number 2, the universe expanding. Well, I believe in the expansion theory, which means the universe expands and contracts and expands and contracts, and it does that forever. Now, that's just somebody's wild idea. There's no evidence of that. But there's a lot of people that want to believe in wild ideas to overcome some of what the implications of this are. So that's one example. But the other ones, I can't think of yet.
Oh, now
Jacob.
one thing you can bring up is that the universe isn't just expanding. But if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually accelerating.
Yes, that's true.
And so if they try to say, well, at some point it's going to contract, you can push. Well, there's not only is there no evidence for that, there's actually evidence for the contrary. That
Right.
It's expanding even faster. And so if you're making up a non-naturally, observable, non-natural cause for it to loop, then essentially you're claiming to believe in the supernatural. And that's what I believe in too, except that the supernatural, it explains a lot more than just, how the universe could go back to being formless. It actually explains why it has form to begin with.
Yeah, but John, to your point, everything here, a skeptic would say, this is all conditional upon new scientific explorations. And we think the James Webb Telescope, for example, is going to tell us a lot of things that will help us understand how the universe created itself. So it's always that punting to the future. Yeah. Last year in this session, we had a young lady who said, I've been waiting for years to hear this information. And at the end of the session, some of our students, Jacob included, helped her make a profession of faith for Christ, right? So this is real stuff that people are hung up on, stumbling blocks. So, yeah, that there's a multiverse right now where there's a group, the exact same group is sitting in the exact same, except Annie's doing the presentation and I'm sitting where Annie's sitting. And then there's another universe where the exact same group is sitting here, but Ray's presenting, and he's doing it by doing handstands, And it just goes on and on and on with all the nonsense from the multiverse. In other words, anything is possible.
And what generated all those universes?
Exactly. They're not eternal either. Yeah. So, but
More complicated.
Yeah.
all right. We good with this syllogism? Yeah? Everything that begins to exist has a cause, and the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. All right. Now, you might say, well, that doesn't prove there's a God. And I'd say, you're right. It doesn't prove there's a God. But this is a cumulative case showing the evidence, right? And what does prove mean? Anyway, we'll get there in a minute. So I'd like then to challenge you with this question. What are some of the characteristics that we would expect of this cause? Okay.
Outside of space, time, and matter.
There's three of them. Outside of space, time, and matter. Because if space, time, and matter were created, therefore the entity, the being, the cause, has to be outside of time, space, and matter. By the way, it doesn't mean that the entity can't come into time, space, and matter. But that's in the Bible.
Has to not be dependent on it.
Yes, correct. Okay, there's three. Any more? Annie?
The entity has to already been in existence and not have a beginning.
Ah.
Because otherwise you have this whole cycle of causes and causes, and it's like, what's the origin of
100%.
It's eternal.
Yeah, has to be eternal, because we can't have an infinite regress of causes. Yeah, it's an impossibility. Naphtali.
The creation that we observe implies a lot of attributes of the Creator, because if God was evil, there would be no good. But we know that there is good, and so God is good. And same, if he was ugly, there would be no beauty. And there is beauty, so God is beautiful. And you can go on and on and on with all kinds of good things, logic and
Yes.
all the way down the list of things that imply that's a good thing about God,
Yeah.
because it's good here, or else it wouldn't exist.
Yeah. Naphtali and I read a book this year by Owen Anderson, the 12 philosophical arguments, and you can It's really a good book. I'd recommend it. It was really good for me because philosophy's not my wheelhouse, logic's not my wheelhouse, and but yeah, you can get there. Now, we're talking today specifically about the cosmos and the universe coming into existence by a cause. So it might be a stretch to talk about beauty, but I can see why you're there. Next time we're going to talk about teleology and the purpose and the beauty of things that we see in the organizing principles and so on. You really could get there, but for sure, all those things you said are true. Any more? Princess?
Intelligence.
Oh, wow. Intelligence, yeah. To cause the universe to come into existence? I mean, it's beyond, it's like Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians, you know, it's God's mysteries that we're just living in the midst of, right? We get to apprehend God and comprehend some of God, but not how intelligent he is, but we can see, yeah. Any others? Jacob and then Rami.
Oh yeah, you'd also need like the power to enact it.
Wow, for sure. Very powerful. Rami.
You would need, or it at this point would need the will to
Yeah.
choose to bring the universe into existence.
Yeah.
And then I think from that point you can infer that that's a personal being.
Ooh.
Because what do we know that has a will that is not sentient, that isn't a mind?
Yes, yeah, good point. And we know that these creatures in the universe, us, have the ability to apprehend and comprehend partially this cause. And that's another reason for the personal side of it, yeah. Any others? Good job, you guys. Annie?
I just have like a random thought.
Yeah.
If like a materialist was looking at this argument and got all the way through the premise and down to the conclusion, and they had to define a cause that was outside of the material universe, what would that explanation be? Because all these characteristics are like they're natural and they make sense, but they're also transcendental.
Right.
Like just a physical object of matter.
Right. Yeah. And the fellow I was trying to think of from Arizona, his last name was Krauss. Lawrence Krauss. And what he would say is that he'd say we need to do more work, but he would say that there was nothing that existed before the universe began, but his nothing is actually something. So he would sneak that in. And so his contention today, and he's very popular, and you can find a lot of debates that he does, is he talks about dark matter and how little we know about dark matter today, and that dark matter gives him the idea that there was energy in place that helped to create the universe. That's what he would say, is there's mysteries, and once we unlock these mysteries, we'll know more. And Stephen Hawking said, because we have gravity, the universe can create itself. But even he's smart guy, right? Who created gravity? What created gravity?
So that reminded me though, that
Yeah.
God is one thing that they aren't, which is logical.
Yeah, logical, yeah. Annie, did that address your comment?
I feel like that made the answer be more like they don't have, where there's different answers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a big picture look at did there have to be some material object before, would they say that, or could there be something transcendental to cause,
Oh, good point. Okay. I'm with you here.
There's a box of something that's material, so if it's outside of that box,
Right.
it's not
So
material.
to your point, they're getting more desperate as the years go by. And there's a concept called panspermia. Has anyone heard of that?
Oh, that's like aliens, right?
Yeah. So Dawkins has even put forth, hey, this all lines up that there's got to be some transcendental cause. Maybe there's aliens that kind of created the universe, and that's panspermia. Yeah, yeah. And listen, he was dead serious when he said this, and so you'll hear scientists say this. So they're grasping at straws, if you've heard that phrase before, and they'll come up with wild stuff like that, or they'll just say, we'll find out in the future. It's kind of like the evolutionary paradigm. It's like, oh, we'll figure all this out in the future, you know.
And that's their God of the gaps argument. Just because we don't know, you can't automatically assume God.
Yeah, but reversed on them.
That's what they like to say.
Yeah. But you see, it's back to Richard Lewontin. He said, we can go no other place. It's back to this presupposition. We have no other place to go. We're on the edge of a cliff, and we can't fall off the cliff, divine foot in the door. So we have to stay true to that presupposition. Sad.
Someday we'll have the answer.
Science will have the answer. Yeah.
I was listening to a YouTube video of my favorite apologist, David Wood.
Yeah.
He's pretty abrasive, but I really love him. He's a really expert on Islam, defending Christianity as opposed to Islam. And he was critiquing this fairly recent interview with Dawkins. And he's like, look, the truth comes out. Dawkins said, I used to think, what would it take for me to believe there's a God? I used to say he would have to show up. But he said, now there's nothing that could convince me. If the stars aligned and said, I am God and I exist, he said, I think there could be some demon angels who did that, or some trickster aliens who did that. And on it is ridiculous arguments. And he confessed, there's nothing that would convince me there's because he's so dead set in his worldview.
Yeah.
It was a very, very interesting little.
Yeah, and his reputation's on the line too, and a lot of money, right? Because he couldn't capitulate. Look what happened to Antony Flew. When anyone know of Antony Flew? Antony Flew was the most notorious atheist in the 20th century. He died maybe 2011, something like that, old guy. And late in his life, he became a theist because of what we're going to talk about next week, okay? The fine-tuning of the universe. And he lost his reputation. He was pulled through the mud by all the community. So anyway, these guys are in a tough spot. And I think they've hardened their heart too. That's a theological, thing we can talk about. They've hardened their heart, and maybe God has given them over to that. Yeah, Romans 1. So let me move us on. I think you've got almost all of them. There's a couple I might throw in. Volitional, personal. Volitional meaning made a choice. Okay? The cause made a choice. Self-evident, that the cause is self-evident. That there has to be a cause, okay? Maybe that's a little bit redundant. Spaceless, timeless, immaterial, like Princess said. I would throw in infinite too. Infinite's not the same as eternal, okay? Without limitation in all ways, and that gets to powerful as well. Eternal, like Annie said. I like immutable too. This was something that Naphtali and I studied in Owen Anderson's book this summer. Immutable, meaning this being cannot change. Okay? First of all, when you're an eternal being, an infinite eternal being, this is a little bit of a mind teaser. First of all, there's no cause to change you. Second, there's nothing for you to change into. Isn't that, it's like, whoa. But that's the way it is.
Is that like a product of being perfect, though?
I think it's a product of being infinite.
Because, I was also thinking like the...
but perfect as well, yeah.
Yeah, But you mentioned like if if it's the cause of everything, then no cause would be sufficient to affect it. But I mean, if I like brew some coffee and I'm the cause, I'm the one who turned it on, and then it like burns down my house, like, and then I like suffer burns or whatever. It's like I can cause something that can come around and affect me.
You're saying that
Like
the cause.
God caused the universe, and because
We're talking about causing him to be changed.
Okay.
Those two, that's the connecting point there.
Okay.
Yeah. Not saying that that God couldn't create us, who even our prayers, even though he knows them in advance, there's some cause and effect there. That's not what I'm saying.
Sure. Okay.
I'm saying
right. His nature,
his
the fundamental nature.
Yes.
Wouldn't be subject to change.
Yes.
Because if it were, and he could have changed his nature, then who's to say that it hasn't been just changing all the time, and then you're kind of back to like infinite regress?
Right. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask one more thing. What's the difference between timeless and eternal?
Timeless and eternal. Well, outside of time is what I meant by number 5, timeless.
Gotcha.
Yeah, outside of time.
As opposed to like always existing.
As opposed to always existing.
Okay.
And the last one is just powerful, like you said.
Okay.
So we're going to add to this list next week when we see another aspect of this great cause, and that is the organization of the universe. Chris?
So I would say God is not on a learning curve.
Exactly.
He's not studying and trying to get better.
Yes.
He's stumbling across new knowledge and go, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's no potential in God is another way to look at it.
Yeah.
God is, and he says, I am who I am. And that's kind of helps us see that, right? All right. It is 7:50, so we have a little bit of 10 minutes or so before our official end to the meeting. Any questions at this point before I get into the objections that we can wrestle with? Any questions or comments?
I think like if I find myself talking with someone who's like struggling with this and like accepting that there is a God, I would like kind of like after really presenting this, hopefully if I can do that perfectly, like you've done, and they're still not like budging, I'll just be like, okay, hold up, what are you afraid of? What if there is a God? And like what would that lead to? Let's go on that route.
Yeah.
Let's actually trace that step and where that could possibly lead us to.
Yeah.
And like seeing the outcomes, like what type of outlook would you have? Do you think it would change anything? Like realizing that there is like consequences to your actions. And what are you running away from?
That's a really powerful tool.
Because it feels like you're running from something. You don't want to face the fact that you can actually be held accountable, and
Yeah. And when I press my friend that I talked about earlier, when I press that person, they go to God is evil. I don't even want. Even if he existed, I wouldn't want him, And that's like the sign of a hardened heart right there. But you need to get there. You need to ask those questions. A good question is, what would it take for you to believe that God exists? Right? And what you'll hear a lot is a real arrogant sort of, I would need God to write it in the clouds or come down and touch me and talk to me personally, Wow, you're pretty special that you would require that from the God that spoke the universe into existence, But that's what that question will get you there. So I really like your thinking. No, you go, and then Jacob.
I guess to that, my answer to that person will be, well, I'm right in front of you. Like think about every single person who has talked to you about God. Do you think that's like normal.
Mm.
Like, don't you think someone is trying to get your attention?
Yeah.
That's something like when I was younger. I don't know how old I was then, but I was like Lord, like give me a proof of that you love me and that you know who I am, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like in that same moment, it just hit me that like every single person who has been speaking to me about God, like that has been God's love expressed towards me.
Yeah.
Like, since I was a kid, the people who took like time to like, my sister who took time to talk to me, like that is literally God in my very face. So it's like, what else do you want, you know?
Yeah.
I'll tell them like, you're literally standing before someone who traveled across the country. No, across how many? I mean, I don't know what ocean is that, but
Yeah.
I'm standing right in front of you, and you still up in the desert, God. Like, why am I the one speaking to you right now? I could be anywhere else.
Right.
Why am I here talking to you? I think that's normal. So that's what I would tell that person. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a coincidence, right? Yeah. Good apologetics. I love it. By the way, you know, a Ratio Christi principle is we have all this knowledge and syllogisms and stuff, and we don't want to barf that out on anybody. That's not going to change them. But doing things like Princess was just suggesting, asking questions, getting them to think their own thoughts, that's harder to do, and sometimes it takes away from our ego because we want to be the smartest guy in the room, you know? But it's a way to help somebody change, getting them to think their own thoughts. It's a more clever way. So speaking of that, let me then jump to some of our challenges. And I've got like 12 of them, but I'll start out with these and try to respond with a question if you can. What question would you ask, okay? This person says, proving God's existence is impossible. How do you know that? Yeah. Yeah, Nathaniel, that's good. How do you know that? Tell me more, right?
What is the definition of proof? Like, what to be a complete proof?
Yeah, what do you mean by prove? And what would it take? Yeah. Ramy?
Is proving anything possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Nancy, did you have your hand up? No?
Isn't the burden of proof on them to prove that he doesn't exist?
Sure seems like it could be. You know, if you believe like we do, that the evidence is on our side, right? Not just the scriptural evidence, but scientific, historical, philosophical evidence, right?
But to be fair, I think like God, or saying that God exists is kind of like a positive claim. You know, if I like, I mean, I guess, yeah, there's some things that are kind of self-evident, like I have a, you know, I was born. Sort of,
Yeah, true. Hey guys, hi Preston. So, I don't have anything to add here except that you could go down the rabbit trail a bit on the proving thing. I like to avoid the word, although you heard me say it earlier and I stumbled and I changed it, right? Sometimes we use it when we're trying to talk to somebody. I like to use highly likely or highly reasonable. And if you look at the U.S. Court of Law, what's the standard for you as a juror to put somebody to say guilty?
Beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Reasonable doubt, right, beyond a reasonable doubt, which is generally thought to be around 80% or so. There's no number on it. So, yeah, I mean, if that's the place to go, it's like, you know, how likely is it that the universe began to exist and that this was the only time in history where there's no cause for something that amazing? Is that likely, right? All right, here's the next one. This doesn't prove the God of the Bible.
I would ask them what kind of, you know, being does this prove? I probably wouldn't use that word.
Yeah. Show.
But yeah, what kind of being does this show? Because it won't be the exact God of the Bible because we can only find that from Scripture. But, you know, hopefully through using questions you can get them to kind of I guess, funnel in on the characteristics of a monotheistic God
Mm-hmm.
that would only apply to the God of the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Preston and then Jacob.
I would just ask, do you know the God of the Bible?
Yeah. What do you know about the God of the Bible, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Who do you think the God of the Bible is?
Yeah.
My nephew's an atheist, and he's a really, really brilliant man. And one of my struggles is I challenge him, have you tried reading the gospel? Because he is really resistant to actually reading the Bible per se. And I think that's a challenge because, and this is personal for me because he's my nephew, but he's looking at all this other data, but then ignoring, and I'm just pleading, just read the New Testament, just start there,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a really good point, because his understanding is really incomplete. He's just missing a whole bunch of data as he's doing all this analysis, and he's really smart and he's really spending a lot of time, but he's looking at atheistic proofs, basically, right?
Well, can he prove that George Washington existed?
And Marco, it's a little bit like all of us, including your nephew, we've come into the middle, right? And we were talking about earlier, and so the context is needed in order to understand that this is highly likely, especially for someone who's really smart. Yeah.
You can be so smart, but you can be really ignorant as well.
Well, Stephen Hawking is a great example. We were just talking about that. Yeah. There's a couple other things that you could do here. When it comes to apologetics, none of our arguments, first of all, are going to get anyone into heaven. Okay? But what they do is they start to take down walls and barriers that they've built. But our arguments are a cumulative case leading to the high likelihood that the God of the Bible is true. And so, it's a lot more, or it's some more, than the argument for the existence of God from cosmology. There's other, for example, you got to show that Scripture is reliable, okay? And that's, you talk about prophecy, fulfilled prophecy. You talk about archaeological evidence, you talk about eyewitness testimony. So a lot of other things. It's a cumulative case if somebody's really, really not understanding. So, yes?
So that takes the question off in a different direction. It's a redirection. It is not dealing with the question of the universe having a cause, and in the same argument we'll call the cause God.
Good point.
And then saying, well, that's not the God of the Bible. Well, that's a different issue.
That's right.
The whole intelligent design movement is aimed at showing there was an intelligent cause of the universe without saying it is the God of the Bible.
Yeah.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Redirecting away from
Yeah.
the question.
Good point, Chris. So the question back would be, did you think I was trying to prove the God of the Bible?
Yeah.
I wasn't. What I'm trying to do is get you one step towards a cause that is all-powerful, eternal, etc. Nathaniel?
Yeah, I was going to actually say what you said exactly. I was going to say, so you're indirectly saying there is a God. You're not saying it, but indirectly affirming it by saying, well, it's not the God of the Bible. You're just basically affirming it.
Saying this proves
Yeah.
there's a God, but it's not.
Yeah.
So
It
you're
could
saying there's a God.
Right. So are you a theist now, you could say? Because, so we now have three major monotheistic religions, so we've narrowed it down to those three maybe for you. And that's possible, right?
Discounted atheism.
Yeah. And actually, that is where Antony Flew, we think, died. With the idea that there's a God, but not as a Christian. Yeah. So he was knocking on the door. It's 8:03. I'll do a couple more of these and then we'll... Let me pass on that. Okay. You'll hear this one, especially among young people.
Ooh, yeah, classic.
Yeah.
That's a relativist argument, right?
What question would you ask, Preston?
Why does it matter?
Yeah.
I guess from your point, it doesn't matter, so I can punch you right now, and it doesn't matter. Maybe that's not the best point, but it's no, we have morals in this society. Why?
So are you saying your response would be to punch him?
I'm saying why does it matter if I punch you? I shouldn't go to jail because nothing matters. I shouldn't, everything's relative. It's a relative argument.
You're asking about
Yeah.
why does this matter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but you're onto something there. We talked about taking the roof off materialism, and where does it lead? The word that you just said was sociopath, right? So why does it matter? Because do we all want to run around being sociopaths, psychopaths, believing that nihilistic cultures are the way that we should live, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's that famous argument where it's if God doesn't exist, it doesn't matter whether you believe in him or not, but if he does exist and he's involved in our lives, then you would really hope that you're on the right side of the equation, otherwise it's not going to work out well for you. And so I feel that has enough weight to, I don't have that defined as a question, but I just think that has enough weight where it's if it's true, then there'll be consequences for not believing, and therefore you want to give it some thought because it's highly likely.
If it's of infinite importance, if it's true, right, to your life.
Have you heard of Pascal's wager?
That's what you were referring to, Pascal's wager, yeah.
I would say if God does exist, why should it matter to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because it means that you have a cause,
Mm-hmm.
you have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an intention for
Mm-hmm.
all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be just a little bit important to find out why you're here.
Yeah.
And I feel that person already would already be thinking about the whole essence of life.
Yeah.
What they're here for.
Yeah.
And if there's any purpose to their life or any meaning.
You could move right into worldview stuff, right? Meaning, purpose, morality,
Or even
mortality.
Mortality, but then the necessity for morality.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning okay, so then why do we have a justice system?
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't matter, this is just my perspective though, but if nothing matters in the context of not acknowledging a God's existence, why do we seek to have a fair justice system to begin with? Why do we want to punish evil? Why do we want to punish criminals? Why is there an inherent need to have a legal system? Why do we want fairness in this world? Why do we want righteousness to overcome evil? I would ask those questions for the sake of just there's obviously some level of morality that we all create and try to define for ourselves until we recognize God's existence and the morality that he puts in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Also,
Good.
why do you feel
Good.
empty?
Why do you feel empty?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Kathy, last comment.
The question that's being presented reveals a little bit of the person who's asking.
Yeah.
If you could convince me that God exists, why does it make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would come back with the answer or the question that you want us to ask. May I tell you about his love?
Mm.
Because if they're coming from emptiness, the best thing to fill it is a part of his person.
Yeah.
Who is he? And how does that person asking this question relate to who God is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could go back and forth, or we could go back and forth with interactions of knowledge,
Yeah.
but I want to get them where I want to take them.
Yeah.
So the question I need to ask is, where do I want to take them? May I tell you about His love?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. The triangulation between you three, what you've discovered in this person is their God-shaped hole in their heart is showing, right? Like Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, we all have a yearning for God, even if we don't know. And you can go there then with that person and deliver a gospel message, which is what we ultimately want to lead to, right? Yeah. All right, it's 8:09, taking you a little bit past. I'll just show you the other ones, and then I will put these slides in the group me. So if you want to see some of the other challenges, they're there. Just because we don't understand something doesn't mean we can leap to God as an explanation, God of the gaps. If God wanted to communicate with us, it wouldn't stay hidden and shrouded in mystery. This is kind of what Princess was talking about earlier. You know, like, I need this God to come, intervene and speak to me directly versus through you, right? If God was the cause of the universe, what is the cause of the God? That's the infinite regress. Science disproves God. Lot to talk about there. There may be a supreme God, but that supreme being doesn't matter because it created and then left the universe to operate on its own. So this is a deism claim. As far as we know, we might all be living inside a computer simulation. Proving that God exists and Santa Claus exists are the same waste of time. Proof is unnecessary since God's existence is accessible by much surer means of religious experience. This could come from within the family. And it's a serious question, and it's not necessarily that this person is wrong, but that they're discounting evidence in the mind. And even this might be somebody that you could talk to about the Gospels and how Jesus was leaving evidence behind everywhere he went. And even Paul talks about it, right? We did not make this up. This is clear, this is history, right? So they could be discounting that. And by the way, this person could be a Mormon. Okay? Yeah. Proof in general is impossible since we must trust our brains. Yeah, I've heard that before. That's somebody who's taking the materialist argument to, a dark area. So let me just show you, if you're going to read one book, this is the one I would read. It's contemporary. It's written by Dr. Stephen Meyer from Discovery Institute. Very, very valuable for me. This was my book of the year in 24. This is Antony Flew, the fellow that I told you was the most notorious atheist in the 20th century. And he wrote his final book, There Is a God, right? No is crossed out and A. It was a fine-tuning argument that did it for him. The Language of God, Francis Collins. I'm not a big Collins fan, but he went from atheist to theist, and he claims Christianity, although he's got a weird form of Christianity. I'm not sure he's a Christian, but this would at least be like the Antony Flew, where he moved from atheism to theism, and he's well-known, former head of the NIH. Foresight, Marcos Eberlin. He's a fellow at the Discovery Institute. Your Design Body, Steve Loftman and Howard Glickman came here a year and a half ago and talked to us. This gets more into how your body's designed. And then Bill Dembski, who's a neighbor of ours here, lives close by, and Lacona, Darwin on Trial, famous Philip Johnson book from about 30 years ago. Genetic entropy was really interesting for me because this was a fella who worked for a seed company, can't remember the name of it, and his whole research career was bombarding plants and seeds with radiation to try to create new varieties. He failed every time because the radiation, the mutations, were always deleterious. They were negative, which showed him something, okay? Furthermore, this is so cool, he figured out that in the human chromosome that there is a consistent mutation. So your children will have a mutation that you don't have, okay? It's very small, but it's consistent, okay? All of you, the same way. My children have a mutation that I don't have. You can reverse that, and you can get back to a perfect chromosome, and it was about 7,000 years based on a 25-year generation. That flipped him, okay? Genetic entropy. And then I'll put these two books in a PDF format. Why Does God Hide From Us? Because it has some applicability here. And Does God Exist? These are Ratio Christi booklets. These are 7,000 words, so it's something you can read in an hour and a half or two and use as a reference. Next week, we will continue this series of arguments for God's existence. This will be the teleological argument, which gets more into design and purpose. I hope you all can make it. I'll be presenting, so I'm excited about that. And then the week after, we always try to take a break on week 4. We just have an open discussion where we will kind of facilitate things we've talked about or contemporary issues. We'll bring in pizza. We'll get in a circle. That's in 2 weeks. And then in 3 weeks, our friend Brandon Bell will be here, the author of Trailhead. So that's September 22nd. We'll bring some books. We'll be giving some books out to those that ask great questions. And so Brandon will be here presenting on this. And this is an apologetics book for a brand new believer. So it doesn't nerd out too much on them. We did a little bit of that tonight. It's pretty good for a new believer. So, and then I just want you to know that I've got copies of books, Things Atheists Say, for free. I would recommend this book. I didn't have it on the slides, but I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Frank Turek and Norm Geisler wrote that. And then whenever I can, I subscribe to Voice of the Martyrs. It's easy to get all wrapped up in our U.S. Christianity, but there's a lot of suffering and persecution that's going on around the world. It's denied by a lot of people, but these are real life stories. This is Sudan, all about Sudan. This one has, this is about India, okay? And this one is a number of different countries: Uganda, Nigeria, Laos, Colombia, India. It's a great organization, and these are free. I've read them, so I'm just handing them out to y'all. Okay, so come up here and get these, and then let's close with a prayer.
Lord, thank you so much that we can gather here and just hear about the magnificence of your glory that's portrayed in creation. All the evidence that you've left for us to see and behold your glory. It's just so mind-blowing every time. God, I thank you for allowing Bob to be here to teach us. Thank you so much that he cuts the time out of his week to come and share this evidence with the community. Thank you for his investment in this group. Lord, I just pray for us as we receive all of this knowledge throughout these next several weeks, that we would not just sit on it and bury it, but that we would use it to the best of our ability, Lord. Just use your Spirit to move in us throughout wherever we go. That way we can share this evidence with others and share the gospel and have gospel conversations with everyone around us as we go through classes and the workplace and everything in between, Lord. Thank you so much for your Son and for his amazing sacrifice, Lord. Thank you so much for his resurrection that allows us to have fellowship with you. Please do not let us sit on this information either. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.